Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company, 440 Sports here on a Titans Monday on YouTube, of course, at Stillman and Co., the official YouTube page of Stillman and Company. And again, like and subscribe. And if you are a podcast listener, you'll be listening, not live, but that's okay. You'll be listening on your time. And subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. We're Apple, we're Spotify, we're Amazon, we're subscribe everywhere. And it is a Titans Monday today here on the program. And Titans Monday, I actually am a little shocked. Titans Monday used to be fun. Like when we started doing Titans Monday, it used to be fun because the Titans used to be good or at least competitive. So 3 games into the year, they were 2-1, and they had, Mike Vrabel's first year. I believe they had just beaten the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles in overtime. That shit was fun to host on the radio. Now Titans Monday is just, another depressing Monday in which we talk about our horrendous team. And the games are so bad, I don't even get worked up anymore. I mean, again, I got the entire show outlined for today, and there's not really any talk of what happened in the game yesterday. No talk of the fact that 3 plays into the game, Cam Ward just handed Indianapolis a touchdown. Just gave it to him. I mean, he couldn't have thrown Kenny Moore a better pass. I tweeted out Kenny Pickett could have intercepted that. And somebody replied and said Kenny Loggins could have intercepted that. There was the Jonathan Taylor touchdown. There was the halftime meltdown from Brian Callahan again, which has become a weekly occurrence. And I said yesterday on Post Game Live, just to catch everybody up, I said yesterday on Post Game Live, I think the Titans should fire Brian Callahan. That if I owned the team, which is how I make decisions as to what I'm going to say on a program or not, I say, hey, if I own the team, here's what I would do. If I owned the team, I would have fired Brian Callahan last night. I would have made an announcement last night, and everybody would be talking. Mike McCoy would have already held the press conference. Chad Brinker, well, I say if I own the team. If I own the team, I would have already had a press conference today. Chad Brinker would have already had a press conference today. And Mike McCoy would have already had a press conference today. But I don't own this team. So I guess it's a little different. By the way, Josh says in the YouTube chat, still Billy, stand up. I've watched the Alex Cooper documentary on Hulu, Call Her Alex, in which they go over how she developed her podcast and it turned into Call Her Daddy, and they've got the Daddy Gang. I'm thinking we may need to be the Still Billy crew or the Still Billies or whatever. I think I may have to take that. I may have to run with that. Okay, Titans Monday. So, for the second season in a row, the Tennessee Titans season is over after just 3 weeks. And think about how football fandom works. You spend all year, January, February, March, April, May, June, then training camp starts in July. August, there's preseason games, but anything bad that happens in the preseason doesn't matter because it's the preseason. And anything good that happens in the preseason is great because that's going to be a sign of what's to come in the season. And here comes September. And every year we see a team like the Washington Commanders last year, or the Houston Texans the year before that, or the Jacksonville Jaguars the year before that, worst to first. And so deep down inside, every football fan has a little bit of hope. Every football fan wants to believe. And if nothing else, they just want to have an entertaining season. They don't just want to pack it in 3 weeks into the year. And here we are for the second year in a row, where after 3 weeks, we can say it's time to pack it in. Last year, the Titans were 0-2. They got smoked at home by Green Bay that was playing a quarterback that you traded to them 3 weeks prior for a 7th rounder. The young quarterback you had that you all had pinned your hopes on was terrible, and the summer of let Ran cook had turned into what was inevitably going to be a sad and depressing autumn. Now, 1 year later, after 3 weeks, here we sit, 0-3 again. Smoked at home again by an Indianapolis Colts team playing Daniel Jones at quarterback. I would just like to let the record state, I actually suggested that the Titans sign Daniel Jones if they weren't going to sign Sam Darnold, who, by the way, had a passer rating of 154 yesterday. But you people thought Daniel Jones was a total bum, and yet he and his team walked into Nissan Stadium yesterday and kicked your ass. And here we sit, September 22nd. It's not even Rosh Hashanah yet, and the decision desk can call it. The 2025 Tennessee Titans season is over. You know this team sucks. They know this team sucks. Everybody knows this team sucks. You don't, even if you have a good team, you don't make the playoffs after starting 0-3. Not that anybody expects them to make the playoffs, but there's really no reason to even watch this team. And again, the verdict is in officially 3 weeks into the year for the second straight season. So I want to acknowledge the horrendous turn of events. I think there's a lot of shows today that are probably spending a lot of time talking about firing Brian Callahan. And I give Buck Rising credit, and I give Robbie Stanley credit, and I don't know who else has gone on the record and said, hey, they should fire Callahan. But I give the people that have the balls to get up there and say it, I give them credit, because the older school media never used to say, you need to fire the coach. You need to fire the GM. They would wait for the team to do it, and then they would say, yeah, that's a good move. And I appreciate the people, even though this is obvious, I appreciate the people on the front end that, again, have the balls to get up there and say, yeah, you need to fire this coach. He sucks. And he does suck. But my whole focus today is not, should they fire Brian Callahan? The answer is yes. But I've been saying this, and I'm going to keep saying this. Brian Callahan is a problem when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. But Brian Callahan is not the problem when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. So let's focus on the here and now. Brian Callahan is the topic du jour, and the fans cannot get him out of here fast enough. And yesterday I said on Postgame Live again, if I owned the team, I'd fire his ass. Mike McCoy would be the head coach. And you people, the fans, you would get what you want, which is Callahan's blood. Again, he's not the problem around here. The problem with the Titans, and this was the same opening monologue I had on the radio a year ago after the Green Bay game. The problem with the Tennessee Titans is Amy Adams Strunk. It always has been, and it always will be, until she decides to change. There is not a player they can draft. There is not a trade they can make, a coach they can hire, a GM they can bring in who is going to save the organization until Amy Adams Strunk changes. Period. If you want to focus on what they can control today, and you just want to focus on Callahan, I can do that. But all that means is that some poor schlub will become the head coach next year, and 3 games into the season we'll be having the exact same discussion. And I can promise you somebody will take that job because it pays millions of dollars. It's one of 32 in the world. And all of these offensive and defensive coordinators with their play sheets in front of their mouth as they call the plays, they all think, I can do it. Even if somebody tells them, hey man, that team has shit ownership, I can do it. So some guy will take that job. And again, 3 weeks into the year, we'll be in the exact same spot that we are in today, that we were in 3 weeks last year. This is about ownership This is about Amy, and it's really about accountability for that ownership. So let me be blunt when I say I don't know who runs the Tennessee Titans on a day in and day out basis. There's Amy. There's Kenneth Adams. There's Barclay Cunningham Adams. They all own the team. There's Burke Nihill. He's the team's CEO. There's Chad Brinker, the president of football operations. There's Mike Borgonzi, the general manager. And if you've ever interacted with the Titans, I can tell you there's about 10 other people in that group that all have titles. And again, deep down inside, I don't know who actually does what. I know Cam Ward plays quarterback. That's the one thing I know. I mean, today they asked Brian Callahan who decides on the headset who's kicking a field goal or not. And he's like, I'd like to keep that in-house. Super secret. Who decides who kicks field goals? We'll figure that out tomorrow. So I can't tell you exactly on a day in, day out basis who runs the Tennessee Titans between all those people. Amy, Kenneth, Barclay, Burke, Borgonzi, Brinker. And I'm sure everybody has their hand in the pot somewhere. But there's only one controlling owner, which is a title that is given by the NFL. And that is somebody who has authority over everybody else. And that person, as we all know, is Amy Adams Strunk, whether she likes it or not. She is the one person with the ability to overrule everybody else and get the train headed in the right direction. And yet yesterday, as Mike Keith was being inducted into the team's Ring of Honor, it was Burke Nihill, the CEO, who gave the quick intro to a smattering of boos. Why did Burke Nihill have to get up there and face the music? Because Amy Adams Strunk didn't feel the need or didn't want to be accountable to the paying customer, the fans. No, Burke. I'll let you go get booed. And that's the problem with the Titans. That right there. Accountability. Amy fires John Robinson because she wasn't happy with the direction of the team. And again, objectively speaking, not subjectively, objectively speaking, winning direction of the team. She wasn't happy about. And she was begrudgingly accountable for that move when she did that little interview with Teresa Walker, which, by the way, and I'm just going to call this how I see it now that I can. And I love Teresa Walker with all my heart. And she's a Hall of Fame reporter, and she's great, but she's not an asshole like me. And she's not an asshole like Paul. And she's not an asshole like some other people that could have done that Amy interview. And Robbie Bourne, the former director of PR for the Titans, whom I believe Brian Callahan ran out of here because Brian Callahan didn't understand last year why he was getting negative press. He's like, why the hell are the fans mad at me? Because you're 3-14. He blames the PR guy. He gets him out of here, brings in a PR guy he worked with in Oakland. And now it's even worse for Callahan. But Robbie Bourne strategically set up that interview with Teresa Walker so that Amy wasn't going to get hounded. But again, she was begrudgingly accountable for that move in that interview with Teresa Walker. She was accountable for the Mike Vrabel firing to an extent. She did that sit down with Mike Keith. She took ownership for it. She was front and center when she made everybody in the building give Rand Carthon, who hadn't done shit, a standing ovation. This was her vision. Remember, collaboration. Vrabel and Rand. And then Rand, Chad, and Callahan. And now Chad, Mike, and Callahan. But what's really happened is the Titans have turned from a perennial playoff contender into the worst team in the league. And the ease with which teams come in here and thump the Titans makes me think it's not really even close as to who the second worst team in the league is. You can't say it's Cleveland. They just beat Green Bay. You're the team that gets walloped by 30 at the hands of Daniel Jones. And Amy Adams Strunk, much to the dismay of the local press, never answered any questions in a press conference, but now she doesn't even go to the press conferences. Mike Borgonzi was introduced as general manager, and she wasn't even there. Again, where was she yesterday when Mike Keith got up there to be inducted into the team's Ring of Honor? She was there clapping, but no words of the fans. Again, they're going to boo her. That's okay. She's earned it. But she can't face the music. She wants to be as removed as possible from the fan vitriol for the mess that she has created. This month, Brian Callahan is the target, just like Will Levis was, just like Rand Carthon was, just like Mike Vrabel was, just like John Robinson was. But unless Amy Adams Strunk changes, there will just be a new target next year. Brian Callahan was incompetent last season. 3-14 record, team not ready to play at Washington because it was too cold outside, smoked by Malik Willis, special teams issues versus Detroit and Chicago, and I can go on and on. But Callahan escaped a lot of the blame because a lot of people made the story about Will Levis. Again, I talked about this past season, and I said, hey, we just spent all our time blaming Levis because that's how it works in Titan land. You blame one person. So we can fire Brian Callahan today, and that'll make a lot of people happy. And if I ran this team, I would fire Brian Callahan. But that would just be addressing one issue with the football team. It wouldn't be solving the problem. And until Amy changes or Amy sells the team, and she's not going to sell the team, this franchise's trajectory won't change, and Cam Ward can't save it. So I, as a Tennessee Titans fan, I am imploring Amy Adams Strunk to take a deep, hard, long look in the mirror and figure out how we got from 2016 to 2022, where the team never had a losing record, where they were always competing for the playoffs, where to the last week of the season, or I guess in the case of 2016, the second to last week of the season, they were always playing for the playoffs. How we got from there to the last 3 years. Go look in the mirror and figure it out. Who were you listening to then? Don't listen to them anymore. And figure out how you get it back to the way it was when you had a competitive football team with a general manager who got results and a head coach who, for the most part, outside of the Vrabel special, had the team ready to play every single week. And if not, if she can't look in the mirror and she can't figure this shit out, nothing is going to change. And it is all about her. So that's the first thing. The first thing is, again, you want to talk Callahan? I think Callahan should be fired. If I own the team, I'd fire Callahan. But that's solving a problem. It's not solving the problem. Let's put Callahan to the side. We'll get back to him in a second. Now, here's the issue that I want to drive home. And this is not to relitigate the John Robinson, Mike Vrabel stuff, but I think that we need to have okay, how did we get here and now what discussion? And again, going back to the Robinson, Vrabel, Amy era, there were three separate yet equally culpable groups here. There was the Amy/ownership group. And it's not just Amy, it's not just ownership, but it's that office folk, the Burke Nihils of the world. Bryce Wasserman, her son-in-law, he's in that group. You know, the guys that go up in the suite during the game and talk a bunch of shit. Those guys. That was one faction. Then there was John Robinson, the general manager, and Mike Vrabel, the head coach. And you can tell, even if you're not living it, you can tell from the outside when there is territorial tension between factions inside of one group. And I look at the 2021 season where the Titans played 90 players and the Titans were the number one seed in the AFC, and Ryan Tannehill absolutely shit it all away with the worst playoff performance I have ever seen out of a Tennessee Titan. And the fallout from that. Because if you remember, the Titans that year had a very, very up and down season. Their first round draft pick, Caleb Farley, hurt. Their second round draft pick, Dylan Radins, sucked. Their first round draft pick a year before, Isaiah Wilson, off the reservation. Their big trade in the offseason, Julio Jones, hurt and worthless. But that doesn't mean the Titans didn't make good additions during that season or before that season. I think Danico Autry was pretty good. So was Deontay Foreman and Dontrell Hilliard and other moves that the Titans made. But what happened was the success of that season and the credit for the success, I think, kind of went to everybody's head. Every single one in those three factions, the ownership group, the Robinson group, the Vrabel group, everybody in those factions started to A, think that they were the reason for the success, and B, started to resent others for there not being more success. And this isn't unique to the Titans. Go back to the Last Dance documentary, the Chicago Bulls of the 1990s, where Michael Jordan felt like he was responsible for all the Bulls' success. And that pissed off Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant. And Jerry Krause, remember? Organizations win championships, not players. Yeah? How'd you do without Michael, Jerry? And that's what makes Phil Jackson, who won all those titles with Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, and Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen, and that's what made Phil Jackson so great. He could balance everything out. Amy and Burke Nihill and their cohorts, they wanted their credit. And they got mad at John Robinson for the bad draft picks. And they got mad at John Robinson for the waste on the Julio Jones trade or the Vic Beasley signing or the Jadeveon Clowney signing. John Robinson probably wanted his credit. They did have 90 players on that team and still won the division and still got a bye and still had home field advantage. They were playing guys like David Quessenberry and David Long Jr. and where did those guys come from? Who brought them in? Who brought in Ben Jones? Who drafted Derrick Henry? Who traded for Ryan Tannehill? Who did all of that? They had to come from somewhere. It's not like the Stork brought them to Nashville. And Mike Vrabel wanted his credit. And you all know Mike Vrabel thought he was the reason that his team was successful. So everybody thinks I did something right and I'm smart and I deserve credit. And then there's the resentment that everybody in that group had towards each other. Again, Robinson, Isaiah Wilson, Julio Jones, Caleb Farley, Dylan Radins, you can go on. But how about Mike Vrabel? It was Mike Vrabel that decided to promote Todd Downing to offensive coordinator when the Titans had the second-ranked offense in the NFL under Arthur Smith, and Todd Downing, who we all know sucks, turned that offense into 17th with essentially the same group. What about Keith Carter, Mike Vrabel's offensive line coach? If I'm John Robinson, is there not a part of me that's thinking, hey, I'm getting you good players, Mike. I gave you an offense that was second in the league last year, and now it's 17th because you got to love Todd Downing. And remember, Vrabel didn't fire Todd Downing after that season. And I thought after the 3 interceptions in the Cincinnati game, I thought the Titans were going to fire Downing and make him out to be the scapegoat, which is, hey, Tannehill was awesome under Arthur Smith. He was awful under Downing. We've gotten rid of Downing, and in comes a new coordinator. But Vrabel couldn't do it. Because, again, with Vrabel, my coach is my team, my credit, my Coach of the Year award. Again, you guys know Mike Vrabel. And that kind of tension happens. It happens in every organization. But Amy didn't like it. So she fired John Robinson. And that empowered Mike Vrabel. But then she only empowered Mike Vrabel to a point, which again, not smart. If you're going to go in on the Vrabel thing, you got to go in on the Vrabel thing. She didn't. They forced Ran Carthon on Mike Vrabel in a shotgun marriage that I think there was one guy in town who said, this ain't going to work. And then a year later, she blamed Vrabel for everything that had happened in 2023 and promoted Ran Carthon, who had not earned that promotion. But again, she hired Ran. That was her GM because I'm blaming Robinson. I'm blaming Vrabel. I want the credit. Me. This is my general manager because I know. Now she's fired Ran because he was incompetent and didn't do anything. And then she promotes Chad Brinker, whom Ran hired and kept the coach. And now you have this disaster in front of you. And none of this is going to change until Amy realizes that this is the NFL and egos and alphas and personalities exist. And if you want to win in pro sports, you have to be willing to deal with them. It's part of the business. You can't just have everybody hold their hands and be happy all the time. That's what she tried to do. That's what gets you Callahan and Carthon. But I don't know if she's going to learn to change. There's real tension in this. And the job of the owner is not to pick sides when there's tension. It's to manage the tension. It's what Jeffrey Lurie does with Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni. The problem is, Amy Adams Strunk has decided that instead of managing the tension, she's just going to hire people to do it for her. And given Ran and Brian Callahan and everybody else, I think it's fair to say, as Titans fans, we can all agree her judgment isn't one to be optimistic about. Boy, she's really picked some winners. It was different when Steve Underwood was here because Steve Underwood, as the president of the team, had 40 years of NFL experience. And he himself, I bet you, will tell you that he had learned from past mistakes. But Underwood's gone. Berg Nihil wants everybody to know he's out of football. Stadium, sponsorships, really anything that has nothing to do with football. Call Berg. He's out. Amy's got Chad Brinker running the football operation. And nobody in this town believes in Chad Brinker because, again, this is the guy who tried to sell us all a year and a half ago on Carthon, Callahan, and the Kumbaya crew. And there's one guy I haven't even really mentioned here. I haven't really even brought up, but I think I should bring up, and that's Mike Borgonzi. Because I do think people in this town believe in Mike Borgonzi, but how many bosses does he have? Again, what exactly does Mike Borgonzi do? What is his authority over? I see people on Twitter. It's a huge pet peeve of mine. I see people on Twitter saying, Borgonzi should get to pick the coach. I'm like, Borgonzi answers to like 9 people. Borgonzi's not even in charge of football. What are you talking about? Borgonzi picked the coach. Borgonzi, I don't even know if Borgonzi picked the players. Think about all of the people that Borgonzi answers to. Amy, Chad Brinker, Burke Nihil, Bryce Wasserman. I'm sure he has to deal with other people. So what does he actually have authority over? And now you see how fucked up this whole thing is. And it's all fucked up because Amy Adams Strunk wanted everybody to play nice. Again, this is one of my favorite things. This was Albert Breer on my then radio show at the Super Bowl. He was on the program and we were talking about why the Titans are such a train wreck. Here's what Albert Breer, the senior insider for Sports Illustrated, the Monday Morning Quarterback, Thursday Night Football on Prime. Here's what Albert Breer said on our show in reference to all of that at the Super Bowl.
For whatever it's worth, I had heard a lot of it was like, Amy wanted the building, this is going to sound so stupid, that like Amy kind of wanted the building to be a happy place and that like she didn't like the tough, hard-nosed, like, and that honestly wound up hurting Vrabel last year in in that hiring cycle where I think people thought he would come in and walk all over everybody, and that's why they didn't want to hire him, because a lot of these owners, as much as they say like they will prioritize winning, it's like they also want to be involved. They also want to be able to walk in and
Sure, it's why Brian Schottenheimer's the coach of the Cowboys.
Be part. Like oh, what a great show! What a great environment we have here. Like that wasn't that's not that program. That program, trust me, I've been around that program since I started covering the league. Like John Robinson and Mike Vrabel were both from that program. Like that, the Bill program is a tough, hard-nosed program that you need a certain type of player and person to operate at a high level in it.
Okay, so Albert Breer's sitting there saying, like, yeah, apparently, and I love the part where he's like, this is going to sound so stupid, but Amy wanted the building to play nice. Do you want to play nice or do you want to play well? I like it when the Titans are good. I like it when Titans Monday is about what happened in the game and not the dysfunction that is the organization. And by the way, before you tell me that, oh, no, it doesn't have to be the Belichick program. Look at Belichick. Old man's out there smooching on the girlfriend before the game and getting his ass kicked by UCF. I agree. But a lot of people around here wanted to be like the 49ers. Remember? Collaboration, the 49er way. Yeah. Talk to people in San Francisco and ask them this question. How much of an asshole is Kyle Shanahan? And they'll tell you he's a big, major asshole. But guess what? He's 3-0 with Mac Jones right now as his quarterback. So again, do you want people to play nice or do you want to run a team? You pick. Now, back to Callahan. Because I know he's the big story. I know people want him fired. And I'm going to be honest with you, I want him fired. This guy is a complete and total boob, and the pressure that he is facing is destroying him. The decisions he makes are worse because he feels the heat. His press conference today was uncomfortable and awkward, not because of the questions being asked, but because Callahan looked like he was about to break down and cry right there in the middle of it. And I love taking credit for being right and really being right, as painful as these meaningless Sundays that we all have to live through are. But I always like to take credit for noticing super early how inept Ran Carthon was or how full of it Chad Brinker is. But there is one thing that I want to admit that I got wrong when it comes to Brian Callahan. I actually thought Brian Callahan was smart at the beginning and throughout most of this. Like, he was actually smart, understood football, qualified to be a coach, and he just put up with all the toxic positivity and the sunshine pumping and all the bullshit last year because that's what Amy wanted, that's what Rand wanted, and he was just going along to get along. But the deep down inside, he knew ball and he knew how to run a team, or at least had the idea of how to run a team. But I have realized that I was wrong about that. He is just as incompetent as Ran Carthon was. And with Ran, I could not just ignore the basic principles of him skipping over his job, like missing the Senior Bowl to fill out the coaching staff, or not having relationships with the local media, doing interviews during practice, and then saying things after they got blown out at Detroit like the ball didn't bounce our way. Taking a right tackle and telling everybody he's going to be our left tackle. Going into the season 2 years in a row without a starting right tackle. I knew Rand was incompetent. I didn't think Callahan was that stupid. And for that, I'd like to own up to. Callahan got the job and he said all the right things right away. But Callahan proved that he was in over his head when he started acting like Nicholas Petit-Frere, a.k.a. PT, could play right tackle. And then he spent all offseason last year doing interviews where he was talking up about how good Will Levis was constantly. And then the season started and it was one debacle after another. And instead of wondering is Callahan a moron? I wondered, is Callahan too nice? What I should have been wondering is Brian Callahan too stupid? Like, is he too stupid to realize when a guy doesn't perform in practice, he's not going to perform in a game? Is he too stupid not to know the rules in the NFL? Is he too stupid to realize that Colt Anderson was a terrible special teams coach and that when you get punts blocked in your first 2 games, it is a sign that you are in over your head? Is he too stupid to know that you can't win in the NFL without a right tackle or win without an edge rusher? And I actually am starting to believe the answer is yes. Again, I was dumbfounded when Brian Callahan made very few changes to his coaching staff this offseason after the disgraceful season they had last year. And Callahan held on to his job, whether it was because he's a nice guy or Amy liked him or they didn't want to fire the coach after they fired the G. I don't know. But it was not a foregone conclusion that Callahan would have kept his job. And this is a league where coaches get fired after 1 year. Gerard Mayo got fired after 1 year. Antonio Pierce got fired after 1 year. And they were all in the same hiring cycle. And none of those guys were replacing Mike Vrabel, who was incredibly popular around here. So Callahan saves his ass somehow, some way by a smidge. And he barely changes the coaching staff? Stupid. Then, when he spends all this time thinking about what he's going to do to fix the football team, he comes up with the Pee Wee program. Yeah, we're going to play rock, paper, scissors, and that's going to make us a better football team. Again, stupid. So I kept saying, wait a minute. I used to think he was too nice. I used to think that he couldn't hold other people accountable. I used to think this was about Callahan and just, hey, he knows ball, but he just doesn't have that muscle in him where, you know what, this is going to hurt somebody's feelings, but fuck it, I got to do what I got to do. No, that's not it. He might just be too stupid. I mean, whatever happened before the end of the half yesterday, I don't know how you look at that and think that guy's not an idiot. And then you couple that with what happened against Denver, and you couple that with a bunch of stuff that happened last year, and it's all starting to add up. Throw in the Pee Wee program, throw in the coaching staff, throw in the toxic positivity, just put it all together, and the results are pretty clear. This guy is a dope. And I hate saying it because I like him. I think he's a nice guy, but this guy's just as incompetent as Ran Carthon was as a general manager. I thought that Callahan kind of saw through that, but there's only one of 32 jobs in this world. And so I got to do what I got to do to get the job, and I got to do what I got to do to please the bosses, and I got to. No, he was a co-conspirator. They talked about in the interview process how Ran and Brian Callahan just started riffing on how to build a football team. And again, I incorrectly assumed that what they probably did was Callahan probably was given a heads up by somebody. Hey, these are the things that Amy cares about. These are the things that Ran cares about. So in your interview, be able to hit on them. And Ran, he got him going on something stupid that Ran would care about. And he was playing the game. No, maybe they were just riffing together on football because they both equally didn't understand it or understand what it took to build a good team. Because after watching Callahan for a year and 3 games, that's the only thing I can come up with. I also think Callahan is probably too stupid to realize that his success in Cincinnati was because they picked 1st in the draft and 5th in the draft. And they picked slam dunk Hall of Famers. He didn't make Joe Burrow. Go watch Joe Burrow in college. Joe Burrow won a national title with Ed Orgeron as his head coach. If you can win a national title with Ed Orgeron as your head coach, you can win a Super Bowl with Jared Stillman as your head coach. So I want to own up to that because I have been right about a lot. I was right about the Pee Wee program. I was right about Ran Carthon. I was right about all the kumbaya that they sang last year when those podcast interviews were too good to be true. just Ramon Foster and Rhett Bryan and Dave McGinnis. And I'll never forget that one podcast interview they did with Rand after Rand had not gone to the Senior Bowl. And I criticized Rand for not going to the Senior Bowl. And Thomas Dimitrov, the former general manager of the Falcons, who came on the program at the Super Bowl. I consider myself friends with Thomas. I really like Thomas. Thomas came on the show at the Super Bowl. And Rand did not go to the Senior Bowl because he and Brian Callahan were getting the coaching staff put together. And I asked Dimitrov, who hired Rand in Atlanta. And I said, well, what do you think about that? And Dimitrov's like, well, nowadays general managers don't go to the Senior Bowl as much as they used to. And then I was like, what would you do? And I pinned him down on it. He's like, well, if I was general manager, I'd go. Yeah, because that's what general managers do. It was incompetent. And I was right about that. And they're doing these podcast interviews where it's like, well, it's a good thing you didn't go to the Senior Bowl, Rand. Chad Brinker and his AI cancer curing injury model. Just all bullshit. And I've called it out. And I'll tell you, the day I realized this was a problem, John Robinson got fired on a Tuesday. On Thursday or Friday, I had enough talks with people in the organization where I realized, holy shit, this was not some sort of HR issue. This was Amy went Leroy Jenkins on the entire operation. And I said, oh my God, you're one of those teams. You're one of the stupid teams. You're one of the teams that we make fun of. I said to Caroline on the Monday after the A.J. Brown Philadelphia game, I said in other organizations, in less stable organizations, somebody gets fired for that performance. Now, I was thinking like the defensive back coach or the defensive coordinator. I wasn't thinking the GM who had won 61% of his games. But that was when I realized you're a terrible organization. You're as dumb as the rest of them. And they're all the same organizations we talk about and make fun of all the time. Cleveland, the Jets. It was Washington until they got a new owner. So, oh my God, you're just like them. The Raiders. They have Tom Brady calling the shots, and they think that's going to make a difference because they're a dumb organization. But I didn't think Callahan was that stupid. And I didn't think Callahan was that stupid for a while. I mean, I thought Callahan was too nice, but I guess I confused too nice and too stupid. No, I think the answer might be he's too stupid. Like, I think he may have sat there in his office and really crunched the numbers and worked really hard and walked away from that saying, you know what the difference this season is going to be? We're going to play tug of war and rock, paper, scissors. And that he actually might have believed that. So I want to own up to it. I've been wrong about very little when it comes to the negative trajectory of the Tennessee Titans. I had to deal with all this shit this offseason from so many of you that were like, you're just a hater. You're just doing this for clicks. You're just 2 off seasons in a row. I've had to deal with that. And 2 seasons in a row by week 3. A lot of you were like, yeah, Jared was right. Or some of you just out there that probably aren't even listening to this show, but they'll see something on Twitter. They'll want to pretend like they weren't spending all offseason saying, you need to give Callahan his quarterback to get a fair shake at it. And I just don't believe in that kind of stuff. But yesterday was the moment for me where I'm like, you know what? Callahan's problem isn't that he's too nice. I watched the end of that first half and I thought his problem is he's too dumb. That's what it is. I mean, if you're Callahan, and go back to the Denver thing where he didn't know the rules, which again is fireable in and of itself. A head coach in the NFL paid millions of dollars to know the rules, not knowing the rules. That then and there is fireable in and of itself. But go back to that where he didn't know the rule. And then he told the media after the game, no, that's not the rule. And then the media said, no, that is the rule. And then the next day he gets up there and talks in the press conference and says, yeah, I got it wrong. And then in the middle of it, he turned it into, I misspoke. Because he's too stupid to realize that we are not stupid. And that's why I said to him in that press conference, I said, well, so wait a minute. After the game, when you say you misspoke, did you know 1 elbow equals 2 feet? At that point, he should have just said, no, I didn't. And taken the L and moved on. But he can't do that. He just can't do it. So as much as the big problem is really about Amy and the way she's run this team, which I think, again, we can symbolize with her making every employee in that building give Rand Carthon a standing ovation when he walked into the facility. I do have to say, Callahan is completely worthless as a head coach. I see no reason for him to continue coaching this group. And while I don't think it will change the trajectory of the season or maybe even the big picture, because then Brinker gets to hire a coach. And what qualifications does Chad Brinker have to make anybody think that Chad Brinker knows that what he's doing? I just don't think getting rid of Callahan will hurt anything either. So I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, that would be bad for Cam to have Mike McCoy run the operation for the rest of the year. How exactly is Brian Callahan helping Cam Ward? I also saw somebody today put out an article saying, most Titans fans are talking about Denard Wilson, but Mike McCoy would make sense as interim coach. Yeah, I've only been saying it for like 5 months. They hired Mike McCoy, and I was like, oh, that guy seems like the replacement for Callahan. All right, let's get to some of your comments, thoughts, whatever you want as far as the Titans. However you want to get in here on the YouTube chat. Sam says, Callahan coming from an organization that thinks they can protect Joe Burrow every year by getting practice squad linemen should have been our first clue. So, first of all, Cincinnati does spend on the offensive line. Like they did spend on Orlando Brown Jr. They used a first-round pick on Amarius Mims to play right tackle. They've paid for Ted Karras. They paid for Alex Kappa in the past. Like Cincinnati, as cheap as they are, they have spent on the offensive line. Let me say this when it comes to Callahan and Cincinnati and his hiring, because I think this is going to happen. I believe that Brian Callahan was as qualified as any other coaching candidate per se in that hiring cycle. The truth is, unless you've worked with the guy, unless you've been around the guy, or unless you trust somebody with your blood who knows that guy, it's hard to know whether or not the guy's going to be a good coach. It's hard when you're not there. It's hard when you don't interact. It's hard when you don't know that person. And that's why so many of these teams get this wrong. Look at who Jeffrey Lurie hires. He had Andy Reid as his head coach forever in Philadelphia. Then when they moved on from Andy Reid, they hired Chip Kelly. And that was a disaster. And immediately he goes and gets Doug Peterson, Andy Reid's right-hand man. He knows him. He trusts him. He gets rid of Doug Peterson. He goes and gets Nick Sirianni, who was part of that Frank Reich, Doug Peterson group. He gets guys he knows. Have you noticed the Eagles have not brought back in Frank Reich? The Eagles have not brought back in John DeFilippo. They have not, because I think that Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie know the coaches on their staff. They know who can coach and they know who can't. So, again, I don't want to get into this whole like Callahan should have never been hired. Well, yeah, now that we know that the guy is a complete dope, yeah, I agree. He shouldn't have been hired. But it's not as if guys who haven't called plays before don't get head coaching jobs. They do. Kevin O'Connell got a coaching job that way. Zach Taylor got a head coaching job that way. It happens. It's okay. Forget about whether or not they should have hired Callahan to begin with. I'm more looking forward to what the guy's doing as a coach. Jude says, Jared, given Callahan sort of not shutting down, dropping play calling duties today as he usually does, are they about to have Nick Holtz call the plays? Now, I don't know Nick Holtz from a jar of Vicks, so I don't want to sit there and act as if I could tell you right now, I think the guy's such a dope that he can't call the plays, but I am incredibly uninspired by Nick Holtz. If I was going to have somebody on the coaching staff call the plays who's not Mike McCoy because he'd be my interim head coach, it'd be Bo Hardegree, the quarterback's coach. I have no idea what Nick Holtz does other than get up at the podium once a week and pump sunshine. That's about it. But I do not think Callahan is going to give up play calling duties. And quite frankly, I don't even think it matters much. And this is coming from the guy who made his bones. My first hit in the Nashville media kind of was with the Wiz and Hunt over the play calling. And I just deep down inside, I don't think who's calling the plays makes a difference as to whether or not this team wins or loses. They can't even decide to kick a fucking field goal after 2 timeouts. I don't think it matters who calls the plays. Rich says Indianapolis ownership was on the sideline yesterday supporting the team with an earpiece in. So can I just say one thing? And I actually thought about this when it came out over the summer after Jim Irsay passed away. And it came out that Carly Irsay Gordon was on the sideline and that Carly Irsay Gordon would sit there on the sideline with an earpiece in and she would listen to the play calls and she had to, I guess, defend it by saying, in this industry, you want to know who's telling the truth and you want to know these are $1 million decisions and who's BSing. And I actually thought, you know what? That's not a bad idea. And let's take the field goal yesterday as an example, or let's use the challenge at Denver as an example. If I own the team and I make the decisions that really matter and I have an earpiece in, I know who fucked up before the end of the half yesterday. If I have an earpiece in, I know who said don't challenge that play or who said, no, it's an elbow. It's not an elbow and a foot. And that's how you know who's doing their job. I have no problem with Carly Irsay Gordon standing there on the sidelines with an earpiece in. By the way, she's undefeated as owner of the Colts. So we can give credit there. George said, I wonder if Brian himself is just silently hoping that they go ahead and fire him and he still gets paid. Again, I can tell you that's not the case. And I'll tell you why I know it's not the case. It's not the case because these guys are built to coach. The way these guys operate is they operate from the standpoint that, yep, I woke up, it's 6 in the morning, and when it's 6 in the morning, and I just woke up, and when I woke up at 6 in the morning, I was ready to coach a team, or I woke up at 4 in the morning, and I was ready to coach a team, and so on and so forth. That those guys just, that's how they operate. And so if you think like, yeah, I'd love to get fired and I'd love to make $19 million and I'd love to go sit on the beach and I'd love to, that's not how those guys are built. I'm going to tell you right now, when it comes to me and my old job, there are a lot of things that I do not miss, that I'm like actually kind of surprised. I'm going to be honest with you. Again, I told the story about how my contract was up in December and we kept working towards a deal, trying to get something done. And then it ended up not getting done. And there was a part of me that thought, if I'm ever not on the radio, I'm going to feel like I've lost my identity. Like, what am I going to do? And now I'm not on the radio and I sit there every day and I'm like, man, it was such a grind to bang out 4 hours of the same thing over and over and over again every day. A 4-hour performance. That was tough, but you don't realize that when you're in it. So Brian Callahan doesn't want to go to the beach and hang out and drink Mai Tais on Amy's dime for the next 4 years. He wants to coach. That's what he does. I'll tell you one of the things that I did notice, and I do miss doing that pregame show with Derek and Chris. I don't miss it that much, though. It was like 9 o'clock yesterday. And when it was 9 o'clock, I was sitting there thinking to myself, man, this is great. Like, I don't have to rush to get downtown and then try to rush to get home for the game. And that was just one thing I was thinking about. D says, what does Amy need to change? And I think that's a very good question from D. And here's what I'm going to tell you when it comes to what Amy needs to change. Amy needs to stop listening to whomever she's listening to. Because whomever she's listening to when it comes to how to build a football team doesn't know what they're talking about. And I have my suspicions as to who the two people I think Amy is really talking to in that building are. And I think those two people do not know what they're doing. And I'll leave it at that. I think Amy needs to find somebody who knows football, who instead of He was once 7th in command at the Green Bay Packers, that she can actually say, hey, I know this guy knows football. He did X, Y, Z. And then let that guy be the one who can tell her yay or nay. Again, it was great when they had Floyd around town because Floyd could tell you, hey, go hire this guy. And they'd win games. Unfortunately, Floyd's gone. But whoever Amy's listening to right now, she's got to stop listening because they're not putting her in the right direction. How the fuck do you end up hiring Rand Carthon? The guy was an idiot. How do you hire him to be your general manager? And then after a year of watching his incompetence, it's one thing to, the rumor is that Amy and Burke Nihill heard Rand Carthon speak at the Accelerator Summit. That's what the NFL did to try to increase minority hirings, is they would have coaches and executives go and mingle with the owners so that they could get to know them. And the rumor is that Amy heard Rand Carthon at the Accelerator, and that Burke Nihill and Amy Adams Strunk heard Rand and thought he was just the bee's knees. Fine. Anybody can give a speech and look good doing it. But after a year of having Rand Carthon around, how do you promote that guy? And that's what they did. Kitten says, June, man, I miss football. July, man, I miss football. August, man, I miss football. September, the F word. Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's even tough for me, somebody who, again, in June and July, I was kind of hammering this, saying, guys, this team, this idea that the Pee Wee programs, they put out a YouTube video in which they said the Pee Wee program was going to change stuff. Denard Wilson spelled out Titan, and then they did an entire segment on Jeffrey Simmons and Cam Ward talking trash. And I thought, oh, God. This team's head is so far up its ass. And I was the bad guy because, once again, he's just looking for clicks. And that was me in June and July. And even I'm depressed by the fact that 3 weeks into the year, it's already over. So whatever, move on. Kai says, I think it's fair to say the Adams family are just not good owners. Bud stunk. The son-in-law, Tommy Smith, stunk. And Amy is not much better. Here's the problem I have with Amy. About, again, lumping her in with Bud Adams, who was, at least he was out there about how bad he was with some of the things he did. And Tommy Smith, who was as disastrous as what it is now. Amy was a good owner from 2016 to 2022. What happened to 2016 Amy? And 2019 Amy? And 2021 Amy? What happened to that Amy? And it's not as if they lost. They were 7-5 and in first place when they fired Robinson. She didn't fire Mike Mularkey right after they lost those 2 games in a row out west in 2017 because that would have been stupid. But she did that in 2022 with J-Rob. She promoted Rand. Again, what happened to the good owner? And I don't understand. Adam in Portland, my man, says, I spent all last season thinking our quarterback was the dumbest MFer in the league. Now I think our coach is the dumbest MFer in the league. Callahan is the main problem. So I saw Terry McCormick had a tweet out yesterday, and I don't exactly remember what Terry, what it said verbatim, but he did put out there, Will Levis, all is forgiven because apparently you're not just the only. Will Levis sucks, guys. Like, Will Levis is not good. And to act as if all of a sudden it was all Callahan, again, that's blame one guy. That is what a lot of people are. Blame one guy. That's what people are doing. They blame one guy. It's more than one guy. It's not just Callahan. It's also Rand. It's not just Rand. It was also Levis. It wasn't just Levis. It's also Brinker. Burke Nihill's been a part of this whole thing too. It's not just always about one person, for whatever that's worth. Also, pray for me because I think I am going to get killed by my girlfriend in about 30 minutes, as I am now just looking at my phone for a second. I do love Indy Ben getting into the YouTube chat. Indy Ben saying the Colts owner seems much more dedicated and competent than Amy Adams Strunk. I'll give you that. Don't need to hear anything. Nothing from me on that. I mean, I'll give you that. Now, I do want to end, even though I am about to get my ass just chewed out when I get home. I do want to end today's show on a positive note. How about Vanderbilt with a 70 spot on Georgia State on Saturday? Holy shit. You know, on Saturday, we adopted a new Australian Shepherd on the first day of this program. I told you that the day before we started this show, we had put our Australian Shepherd down, and it was a shock and a surprise, and it sucked. And it still sucks. We still miss her. She was a great dog, and it sucked. So we put our Australian Shepherd down, and it was just, we weren't looking to go get another Australian Shepherd, but we're very involved. I say we. Lindsay's very involved with Australian Shepherds for FUR, Australian Shepherds Forever, which is an Australian Shepherd rescue. And there was a dog that was perfect. It was our other dog's age, and we just felt like, you know, this was the dog. She was in Virginia. She was being fostered. She couldn't stay. So long story short, we woke up at 5 a.m. on Saturday and drove all the way from here to basically Blacksburg, Virginia, to go pick up a dog and back. So it was 6 hours there, 6 hours back. We stopped a couple of times, walked the dog, filled up, etc. So we left at like 6 a.m. and we got back at 10 at night. So I didn't watch any college football on Saturday, but I listened to college football and I listened to the Vanderbilt game. And I mean, Vanderbilt just put their foot up Georgia State's ass. And it is crazy to me how much changes in a year. A year ago, I watched Vanderbilt completely shit that game away on the road against Georgia State. I remember that because it was on ESPN Plus and I had to log in and I had to download and I'm like, I want to see the end of the game. And I watched Vanderbilt just give it away on defense. And now a year later, Vanderbilt is just ripping that same team to shreds. They are undefeated. They are taking their belts off, and they are spanking everybody on the ass with them. And I think I'm going to go to the game against Utah State on Saturday. 18th in the polls. Alabama in 2 weeks, 17th. Good for Clark Lee. Good for Vanderbilt. And I'm going to say this. I was not, and I love Candace Story-Lee. I think she's a good athletic director. I was a little skeptical when they hired her to replace the disastrous Malcolm Turner. I was a little surprised, and I was not inspired that Candace Lee, of all people, was going to breathe new air into Vanderbilt because she had been there for so long with the way things have been done. But I have to give her credit because her and the chancellor, they don't put up with shit. They're like, hey, we're going to build out a competitive athletic department, and we're going to put our money where our mouths are, both on the field with the players and with the facilities. And they've got a legit football program, and they've got a legit basketball program, and they're building that women's basketball program. So I'm going to give them credit. And I owned up to not realizing that Brian Callahan was a dope a year ago, and I'm going to own up to one other thing, which was a couple years ago, Florida State and Clemson tried to sue the ACC to get out. And they said, we cannot compete with the revenue and the resources that the ACC has compared to the SEC and the Big Ten. And I told my friend, who is an athletic director in the ACC, I said, I just don't buy that. Because Rutgers is in the Big Ten and Vanderbilt is in the SEC. So when I hear we don't have the resources to compete, I thought, is Vanderbilt really going to be better than Clemson? And again, 2 years later, I'll own up to it. Because Vanderbilt, if they played Clemson today, would kick the shit out of them. That's going to do it for us here on the Titans Monday. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Tell your friends, Stillman and Company, live tomorrow on YouTube, right here at 2 o'clock.